Good morning. I'm Mac Taylor, Legislative Analyst, and this morning our office released the report overview of the 2009-10 May revision. As we do every year, soon after the Governor puts out his annual May revision document. A little unusual this year, the May revision, which normally comes out on the 14th. Was supposed to come out a couple of weeks later, but then the Governor changed his mind, and they came out basically at about the same time they normally would have. We don't have as much detail on the May revision as we normally would. They're still putting out information both this week and next week. But we still wanted to give the legislature our take, our initial assessment of this new problem definition and some of his proposals. As many of you know, the conference committee will be starting this afternoon, and so we wanted to get the document out in time to assist them in their deliberations. Let me just make a few comments and then we'll throw it open to questions. First of all, with regard to the Governor's definition of the problem, we think that it's a reasonable estimate, definitely within the ballpark. We don't have really many differences with him as far as the expenditures are concerned. We did do our own updated revenue forecast, and over the 2 years, because we have slightly more negative economic forecast on the California economy, we get $3 billion less revenue over the 2 years. Now, clearly the two revenue forecasts are actually pretty close. $3 billion seems like a lot, but over 2 years they're not really statistically different. So we have put our number out there. Obviously the conference committee and the governor and the leadership can decide on which revenue forecast they wanted to go with. If they were to go with the governor's, it just means there's a little more downside risk in our view. But anyway, we think that basically the definition of the problem is a reasonable one. And I think we all know now what we're dealing with as far as what has to be done to get the budget back into balance. We also took a rough look at the out years. And we found that if the legislature were to adopt each and every one of the governor's proposals, that 2010-11, that is the year after this coming budget year, would still have an operating deficit of over $15 billion. So clearly, and that problem gets even worse in the out years following 10-11. So we clearly have very severe problems that the legislature needs to deal with. Let me just highlight a few of the really high-level concerns we had with the governor's proposal. The number one, I think, was with the RAWs, the Revenue Anticipation Warrants. And some of you will remember when this proposal was put forward earlier in the year, we had significant concerns. We still do. He's counting on $5.5 billion in a revenue anticipation warrant, in effect to help address the budget problem. There's clearly nothing wrong with using a RAW for cash flow purposes, but we don't think that you can do it to help address a budgetary problem. And so therefore we're recommending to the legislature that they not use a RAW for that purpose. It may mean that they would use one later on in the year in order to address cash flow needs, but that they shouldn't use it as an assumption of how to close their budget problem. The governor's budget also has lots of one-time solutions. Of the $21 billion in solutions, $12 billion of them are one-time. Now, I'm not going to advise the legislature to completely avoid one-time solutions. They can't, in my view. They're going to have to use whatever's available to them to rebalance this budget within the next few weeks. But to the extent that they can minimize one-time solutions and approve longer-term, ongoing solutions, it clearly makes their out-year problems somewhat less worse. They also have several of their larger solutions, in our view, are the riskiest ones. And we just mentioned the RAWs, which is their single biggest solution, which we think is both legally risky and not wise from a budgetary perspective. They also have a proposal to sell off part of the State Compensation Insurance Fund for a one-time savings of $1 billion. We think it's entirely appropriate to look at whether we can sell off pieces of SCIF. We just don't think it's very likely at all that you could do that and achieve any savings in 2009-10. They also are assuming that they'll get $750 million in Medi-Cal savings because the feds will waive various requirements. Again, we think it's very appropriate to pursue those kinds of savings and options with the federal government. We just think it's very risky that we can then get savings in 9-10. Not that they shouldn't try, but to count on that we think is fairly risky. So my basic advice in our office is advice to the legislatures. Again, they need to act very quickly. just like they acted in February, primarily because of a pending cash crisis. As you know from a report that I'm sure you all read cover to cover, we put out just about a week ago, Jason, I think, was it about a week? We faced very severe cash flow problems as early as the summer. And if we're going to sell the kind of, get the kind of external borrowing that we need, we have to get our budget back into balance. So I think the legislature needs to act quickly. However, I don't think there's any way that the legislature can address their long-term problem all right now. It's simply too big. So we think they should focus on getting solutions that gets the budget back into balance for 9-10. When they come back for the rest of the session, we think they need to immediately start on working on their 10-11 problem and on longer-term reforms of all sorts of, all across the board, whether it's pensions or civil service or program consolidations or further reductions. They need to get to work quickly to start on the next step of their process of getting the budget back into balance. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.